Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and kick this webinar off for the day. My name is Christy Thompson, and I am with Business Information Solutions, and thank you so much for coming out. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, which I'm sure you're going to have a lot, this is a great topic, please pop them in to the Q&A or send us a chat. We'll try to take some of those questions throughout. They may not be able to be answered then, but we will take all questions at the very end as well. So today's topic is why you must secure your email now using this 4-step email security strategy. So let me go ahead and introduce you to your speakers. First, our host today is Philip Long. He is the CEO of Business Information Solutions. He is also a business owner of, is it 5 businesses now, Philip?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a little slow on the uptake here. I'm gonna get my screens advancing for you.
Perfect.
All right, there you go.
There we go. He's worked in the IT industry for over 20 years now. He has 600 plus clients from Gulfport to Dothan, and in fact, that's growing. I believe we're about to start doing some events and kicking them off in Montgomery as well, so that's very exciting. And he is a certified information system security professional as well as CMMC certified, right, Philip?
That's right. And for the folks on the call that are, doing Department of Defense government type contracts, they're going to see a lot more of that CMMC.
Muldoon. Did I say that right, Billy?
Muldoon, yes, you got it right. You got to roll the tongue. It's Irish. So there you go.
There we go. And so Billy is our guest today, and he is with Demartion. Oh, Philip,
Correct.
can we?
There
we go. Few more down, and he's been involved with many small and large businesses. And for the past 11 years, he's been focusing on email security services. So he understands the needs of businesses from vast work experience. He has 10 years with one of the top US email security and compliance providers. He's delivered Microsoft 365 at launch in 2011 for the SMB's verticals. He's serving and connecting global businesses today with DMARC and helps authenticate email, improve delivery and meet compliance. So I'm going to turn it over to the experts.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, Christy, and thank you, Billy, for joining us today. This is, I think it's probably one of the most relative topics as it relates to security for the SMB space, for small to mid-sized companies. There's just so much risk, and the challenge, I think, is that as we start to get better, in our work, everybody gets better, the bad guys, I mean. And so what are you seeing out there, Billy?
No, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. We're improving our stacks. We're improving our services. The engineers, computer scientists, and everybody who are looking at these things are adding to the existing services to meet the threats. The threats are then shifting, and then we're stepping up to meet those as well. So it is a shifting landscape, and email, of course, is, as you mentioned, and why this webinar is existing, is still one of the main vectors of attack.
Yeah, for sure. I want to talk a little bit about this. This is some stats that you provided. Why don't you go over these for us, Billy?
Yeah, so a lot of the attacks come in from phishing emails. Unfortunately, humans are still the weakest link. So we'll look at some examples to sort of see what leads people to take the actions that cause issues. And so one of the reasons Demartion exists is just that, phishing emails that come in and want something from your organization, typically money. Business email compromise attacks, as you can see, that's a huge number. It's a growing number. These stats are not going down. These are probably about a year, usually a year or 6 months old when we see these stats, and I have a feeling the next set that come out will be also higher as well. Phishing, top cyber complaint. It is a shock to most leaders when they see an email come into their finance department from them and from their domain asking for money, for example. And this is a very common attack. And we'll look farther down the webinar here and see how we can help stop that.
Sure. All right. And then a little bit more. Here are some from that I collected here, 70% of cyber threats enter an organization via endpoints like their workstations, their laptops, and they're often due to phishing attacks. NetSurian is a major player in the marketplace as it relates to cybersecurity. 80% of security professionals stated that they had seen an increase in security threats since shifting to telecommuting. And of course, the top 5 subject lines I think that are relative and important is that something that's urgent, it's a request, something important, a payment. Like a lot of times, they'll get you with something saying you owe a bill, and you're like, wait, I don't owe that bill, and boom, you'll click on something, and then there's really trying to get your attention. And the compromise in these phishing attacks, the number one is credentials. They want your passwords, your username, PIN numbers, some type of personal data, your name, address, email address, and then oftentimes it's related to medical, like treatment information and insurance claims, because they can really parlay that out into revenue. And we got to think differently, in my opinion, on how. I just got off a call earlier with a client on a technical business review, and he was talking about, whether he needs to be, he focused so much on just whether someone could ransom his files. And what I am seeing is so different. Of course, there's still ransomware. It's still off the chain. It's still a big, big, big threat. But I'm seeing where these records are being stolen. And then from there, the reporting mechanisms kick in, and all those type things kick in, and attorneys get involved because they're wanting to do these deep dives on discoveries, and it costs a fortune. It takes a lot of time. Even if you don't have the right types of systems of backups, you can actually have to take down your main system or copy your main system so that they're able to do these deep dive discoveries, so they can actually take you down. So those are very important things that are happening in the marketplace. And
I just want to add a note there, Philip, to that last set. Yeah. One thing for the attendees is to really deeply think how this might affect their own organizations. Finance, new business, marketing, operations. Resources get directed from day-to-day operations to attend these threats and incidents. And so a key thing to keep in mind for everyone is that pain reverberates throughout an organization, not just the targeted department or the IT departments. It can halt a lot of new business and other basically service lines within the organization. So
yeah, and taking on the head of the department, the owners, the C-suite, taking on all of their time in dealing with it, and the frustration, and the heartburn, and then the reputation damage, and just the whole 9 yards really takes you off course.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Yeah,
certainly.
Whenever we're looking at this, is basically looking at a software as a service alert, and the top countries that are attempting but not being successful on unauthorized logins are as follows: China's first, Vietnam, Russia, Korea, and Brazil. But what I find interesting is that the country who is the most successful is Russia. And anecdotally, even from what I've seen, just since the Ukraine event, our web filter, our email filter is lit up with spam and attacks coming from Russia. So, those sanctions, they're going to get paid another way. Ultimately, they're going to get paid through cybercrime, rather, to offset some of that sanction that the world's putting in place. Anything, that you're seeing or want to comment?
So there was on April 20th this year, there was through CISA, FBI, and some international partners, there was an alert about state-sponsored threats heightening through Russia. And that was just on the 20th of April. And I think your incident detection and so forth will probably confirm that as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And just a quick note on ransomware too. As you mentioned, we don't hear so much about it necessarily, but there was an increase in 2021. Like I said, most of this data is about a year or 6 months before we get it released and can consume it. But it rose 92% in 2021 over 2020. So still a threat. And even to small businesses, they don't need to get $1 million from a large business. They can hit multiple small businesses for $300, $500, and things of that nature. So we're all kind of targets if you think of it that way.
For sure. Another threat that's out there that most people don't think about is like, you know, how we're like, say we're moving a big file and we're going to do a shared type file with just a link. You know, we right mouse click, we say, you know, copy that link to the file, and we don't set any expiration on it. We don't set any password on it. We just send it. And, you know, you think about like from a business email compromise, those files stay out and open forever. And if someone was able to hack someone's email account and they were just to scour their emails and look at the files that have been shared with them, there's an enormous amount of data. And the company that we're using, this is over the last year, they're seeing about 440 files that are shared per hour. And again, this is the types of services that we're talking about have really only been around for a couple of years that are watching and monitoring, say, the Microsoft 365 portal. So, but 19% of files are being shared externally. And a large portion of those are being shared with no password, no expiration date. So we're basically launching a potential problem and we're just letting it live on out there in the wild for long periods of time, really even indefinite, that could really bring a lot of risk into a company.
John, I was going to say, not only the exposed data, Philip, but then also a bad guy getting that link and simply injecting some malware in that and then sharing it back, and it would look familiar to you. And so a huge risk there too.
For sure. So point on that really is we need to be thinking about whenever we're sharing these files out in the wild. It's a great thing to have to be able to send the link rather than the file, right? Because we can intend it, but we got to put passwords on it and we got to put time expirations on our files that we're sharing that way. All right, so let's talk about the 4 biggest email threats. One, of course, is just regular types of spam. And then we've got phishing, we have spoofing, and we have business email compromise. You want to kind of outlay, each one of those, kind of just go into a little bit of detail so that whenever we use terms, we want to be sure that we're making sure that we define them, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, spam, of course, is sometimes benign. It may just be some really annoying email that is marketing you and so forth. So sometimes spam is not necessarily malicious. Phishing, that is, targeting and trying to get credentials from someone. This is your fake login pages and things of that nature. Spoofing, this is the one where, again, leadership, they get an email and it's from them with their domain. It looks as if it is them. And that is, a true concern. Again, if finance gets an email from the CEO and it has their domain and their typical email address, then they can cause, a great harm. Then the business email compromise, there's a couple of different ways this will go about. And of course, we'll talk about the man in the middle here in a minute, but that is one of the ways, of course, it's more clever, but certainly, compromising the email, getting your credentials. There are then several different ways that the bad actors can damage a company.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, most people don't really think about all the information that's being passed on. Like if I had access to someone's email account where I could log in via the web portal and just watch their email traffic, a lot of times there's passwords, and the industries are trying to get away from emailing passwords, but it's still happening quite often, where you get your password emailed to you, or not necessarily even a password, but even a code. Like, let's say that you go the step and you turn on multi-factor authentication and you get your authentication come to you. So, the bad actors have access to the username, which is the email. They can reset the password, and they have the PIN code for the multi-factor authentication. So Business email compromise is a major risk that's out there, and just anecdotally, what we have seen, we've gained a lot of new business, and not the way I want to gain business, but off of email. And it's one of the reasons why I want to have you on for this webinar, is because it is so predominant right now. And I would say, in my way of thinking, like, I think that the users are, again, this is anecdotal, but I think the users are getting a little wiser. They're not clicking as often. And that's why the bad actors are now getting more sophisticated in what we're going to get into in a minute here, with some of the features to keep them kind of beat down, that are not being set up. Emails not completely being set up and being managed and monitored. So we'll jump in here. This is just something, I don't know if you want to kind of take this. This is just a basic phishing email example.
Yeah, I think, you've highlighted the things that we should look out for. The couple of keynotes there is, of course, there's the little things like bad grammar and spelling. Those should raise a flag for sure. Links that want you to log in certainly, would call for more scrutiny. There is typically an ask. There's usually, from a phishing, spoofing, or business email compromise, any of these, they're going to ask for something, and there's a call to action, and you can see that here. I mean, it looks important. It's the IRS here. Please follow this link, call to action. And in some cases, they can be even threatening as well. But that's, certainly the flags we should look for. And again, a call to action, they usually want something. And the only other note there is, sometimes you will get an incredibly confusing looking email, and they just want a response. Then they know they have a target, and then you'll get a follow-up with something like this.
Yeah, for sure.
So they're testing the gates, if you will, or testing the waters, and see if the next email might be successful.
We just cannot go into, you just can't express the depths and the sophistication that is happening. We could name everything we could think of as a group of everyone on the call and just start writing out little ways, and then there would still be a million other ways that these guys have figured out how to exploit us. Here's another example. This is just where they're trying to basically, your account's been upgraded. Great. Or they'll say that your account is about to run out of space, but don't worry. All you got to do is put your credentials in, and your account will automatically go to unlimited storage or whatever. Just ways, really, they're wanting to just basically steal your credentials.
Yeah, and I think everybody may have a story of seeing one of these at some point in the past, if not recently. Microsoft is one also that this is their consumer brand Outlook, but the Microsoft 365 login page, bad actors will even go to the extent of making the whole background and everything match completely. And the key there is, if you get an email that says, hey, change your password, or hey, log in and do this, ignore the email and go straight to your provider's portal and log in.
Yeah.
I think you'll find most of the time that the email does not match what's happening in the portal.
That's right, exactly. And same way with banking and everything else, with the don't click on the links inside of the email. Go, with your own known link, go through the other way. And this one, of course, has to deal with a bank. It's talking about unusual login attempts. And ultimately, they're trying to steal your credentials. And, again, I kind of go back to what I said a moment ago, with if they have the email where they have access to the actual email account where they can check the email, they have all the pieces that you need. They have the, say that they're going to email you the password. Really, and like our main application that we used to run our company, no longer, they used to have it where, you could send it, they would send you your multi-factor, your PIN code to, after you put in your username and password via email. They have stopped doing that now. And I think we'll see more and more of that as time goes on, to where they're going to want to push us to a form of an app, like a Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator. We use Duo, which is another third-party authenticator. What's your thoughts on that, Billy?
I think the authenticators are going to really take off. I still receive MFA through a text, but there is a new attack called a SIM swap, where they're able to actually swap out the SIM with a provider through some clever social engineering. And in that case, if my phone was SIM swapped, they would then have access to all of my two-factor stuff too as well. So I'm looking at actually switching over to Authenticator myself because of that issue. Not that I feel like I'm a target, but certainly don't want to have that in the back of my mind as well.
For sure. And depending upon, just in general, if you have what I call a one-to-many, if I have an account that has a lot of important or valuable data, I definitely want to have multi-factor turned on, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. Want to talk about what is they call it a man-in-the-middle attack, and they are very sophisticated on this, and there's really multiple ways this happens. I'm going to go through just a generic case here, and this is just basically Alice and Bob trying to communicate. Now, a lot of times with this, it could be something where you're like, say, for instance, on a public Wi-Fi. And my go-to, I don't care, hotspot your phone, do not get on public Wi-Fi, because this type of attack is very, very, very easy if you're on public Wi-Fi, or if you're overseas, even on like the hotel Wi-Fi and things like that. If a Wi-Fi network is not set up correctly, it is very easy for these guys to perform these types of services. But in this scenario, Alice sends something to Bob. Send over your key. Chris is, of course, the bad guy in this scenario. He intercepts Alice's message and he forwards it to Bob. So Chris to Bob now is saying, send over your key. And then Bob back to Alice says, here's my key. Well, Chris gets in the middle and he says, Bob's key, here it is. He gives it to her. And then ultimately Alice responds back with her account to Bob, and Chris replaces it with his account. And then Bob basically sends the money to Chris's account. I want to lay that out in terms that I've seen really this year, where this was with the title company, where it was between the mortgage broker and the title company. And basically the title company sent the documents to the mortgage broker for the payoff, and there was a man-in-the-middle attack on the mortgage broker side where they were intercepted. And whenever it got down to the wiring and structures, they actually took the document itself and they changed the routing numbers inside the document. Everything else about the document was the same except the routing numbers, and sent that back to the title company for disbursement of funds. That was a $600 and something thousand transfer of funds. Fortunately, the money was covered, but at the end of the day, that's what's going on with these man-in-the-middle attacks, is they are actually getting in the middle of the transaction. And it looks they can take the actual documents, the actual chain, and then they can alter it and forward it on, and you're not the wiser. So it's very, very, very difficult to have this done right. But we're going to get to the good news here in a minute. I don't know, Billy, I'm sure you've seen many, many of these in your career of this man-in-the-middle stuff.
Yes, I worked with a lot of partners in my last gig, and there was always a story, probably once a month, of something of this nature. One of the things to note is that an unencrypted email is like a postcard. Motivated bad guys, your email takes approximately a dozen hops as it gets to its destination, and motivated bad guys can intercept those messages. The other things that they can do, if they do a business email compromise and get a hold of your credentials, they can actually land into your email box. They can watch your emails. They can just watch your conversations and then actually take on your role. They'll use your same vernacular. They'll use your same punctuation. and really look like you. And they will take some great care in that. They may watch it for quite some time and find the most profitable moment to jump in. So I know you have some tools that can help with that too. Keep an eye on these different things within the portals and so forth.
Yeah, for sure. This is to me one of the scariest ones because of just once they have access to your email, man, they got it. And there's even like where if they ever drop a file on your machine where they have access to your computer, they can run a script and export. Like, a lot of people are using, like, let's just say, Google Chrome as their web browser, and how it saves all of your passwords. There is some simple tools that will strip every password and unencrypt it and deliver it back out to the bad actor. So all your saved passwords can be stripped out and sent back to the bad guy. And if they've got access to your email, even if you have multi-factor turned on, they have everything they need to exploit you. And, those are the things. Now, of course, it's a little harder to get a foothold on a computer, but it does happen, and it happens often. All right, so I want to do a quick poll. I want to just kind of check in with everybody. I'm going to launch this poll right here. And if everyone, please, would fill out this, is have you fallen victim to an email threat? And a threat, of course, isn't a successful, we talk about security and security incident and security breaches. And so it doesn't necessarily have to end in a breach, but some type of threat that you've seen. And I would almost suspect that it's going to be about 100% of people that, have had it. And, even probably on a weekly basis at this point. That's why it's so important to have your end users trained up, because a lot of it is getting, blocked by the end user. I will leave that open for just a second more, and then I'll publish it.
While we're waiting on that, Philip, too, just another note on business email compromise. Within email accounts, too, this is a pretty clever one that's interesting. A bad actor can actually go into an email account and set a forward that you don't know about. So in other words, they don't even have to live in your email box. They can set a forward to their own email. You don't notice it because if you logged in and checked your forwards lately, and then so they will get everything you send out forwarded to them and execute a man in the middle from that perspective too. So I had a note there. I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've seen that. I'm sure everyone has seen that. And it's like one of those, again, like we could think up every way we could think of collectively, and there's still so many other ways that they can do it. So we'll look at this, and I'll share this result. So 67% of people, no one said no. Some people aren't sure if they've fallen victim or not, but no one said no. And that's, I think, again, the scary part. And I do want people, I don't want to be a fear monger at all, but like the guy always used this, Bob Groves from Intel. Whenever he really grew Intel, way back, he had a term that he called productive paranoia, where you don't want to have paranoia to the point of where it's non-productive, where it's, analysis, paralysis by analysis, but you do want to question things. And because at the end of the day, it really falls back on the business owner. If somebody does something, tragic to your company, big breach happens, they're really coming after the owner, not the employee.
That's a really good point here. And I think it's important to note that, we're not necessarily trying to sell on fear, but more is improve everybody's knowledge base so that you don't have to worry about these things as much. I think that's key. Yeah.
If you were looking at world economies, the bad actors literally, like cybercrime is third in behind, U.S., then China, then cybercrime. That is how big of a market this is. And if we could take all the money that's getting stolen, it makes our insurance rates go up, make our production go down, all of that. That's kind of the way I think. I'm like, look, we need to somehow get ahead of this ball. And if we could we're going to have to do some things in order to slow that bleed, and then be able to get ahead of this thing. But sadly, in my opinion, and everything that I'm looking at, and even from like the ISC squared, where I'm a certified information system security professional, and I'm doing continuing education, with the lack of cybersecurity professionals, with the market, they don't understand it, is one of the biggest problems from a business owner's perspective. Is they hear these words, but they can't relate them to how that really helps them, and usually they have to get hit before they wake up. And so we're probably 3 to 5 years out before we're going to see, I think a significant slowing down. So we've got some time to burn. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I know. We have seen the uptick, and kind of just to bolster what you're saying, there is actually malware as a service. You can go on the dark web and actually subscribe to deliver malware, and the providers out there will set you up, give you packets to deliver, and you can purchase X number of zombie computers that have been hijacked throughout the years, and deliver your payloads in mass, on a monthly subscription.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's like 75 or 80%,
yeah.
75 or 80% of the return comes back to you.
Yeah.
So exactly. It's very lucrative. It's very, very, very lucrative, because the challenge, I think, is getting somebody in, to click and to follow the process. And the closer or the better you are at that, it's basically getting the client in the door, if you will, and you'll receive a large portion of the overall outcome. So that's crazy. So let's talk about the fix to some of this. Step one, employee training. Monitoring and alerting, active monitoring and alerting is something that is somewhat new in the email space. Of course, technical security measures, and that's what we're going to really lean on Billy for today. And then some type of incident response and disaster recovery I'm going to talk more Microsoft 365, but this could be, it's in general, but of course today we're talking about email. We're going to talk about, more of the Microsoft 365 and the G Suite in general. So we'll dive right in here. Let's talk about employee security training. What have you seen work, Billy?
Yeah, every organization I've been with, even the big security companies, it is still integral that we even have training. So we are trained at the base level of any employee, from an SMB up to enterprise, in the same way, to be aware of these things, because they're commonalities. The key is, being proactive. You want to avoid number 4. That's the instant, the incident recovery and response. If you stay out of number 4. I'm a fan of Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Book is circa 89. But the last habit is number 7, sharpen the saw. So train some more. Humans are the weak link, typically, because the technology, as we'll go through, is there. It can help, but with the weak link of your people, they need to be trained.
For sure. Yeah. And it's a shame that, with the rate of turnover and everything that everyone's struggling on, that we've got our most vulnerability is with our people. And the only, and again, the most cost effective too, really, is just training them. So I want to dig in here. This is something that, again, is somewhat new to the email, like Office 365 will say, the G Suite type portals, where, of course, a lot of people on their email do not have multi-factor enabled, which means that someone in Russia, and one of, from an alerting standpoint, the highest alert is people trying to hack your email. And I think it's like 13 times per hour on the Office 365 platform that someone is trying to break into your account. So there's 13 attempts every hour of somebody trying to break in. And if they ever somehow got your password. They know your username because it's your email. And if they ever got your password, if you use that password where you bought a pair of shoes or you log into, and I think it's still above 60% of people still use the same password across multiple login like platforms. Your Netflix account may be the same as your Office 365 account. If Netflix got hacked, they're going to try it because they have engines that run and just try usernames and passwords across different platforms. So, but this particular tool, you got to have multi-factor enabled, but it monitors if it ever got disabled, which is huge, because we have humans that set up these accounts, and somebody may turn off their multi-factor for a time, they think, and they're going to remember to turn it back on, and they forget, leaving your company vulnerable. Then also those brute force attacks I talked about, where people from all over the globe are just trying to log into your account. You want to geo-fence it to where you people in Russia can't log into your email. That's huge. And then that all the unauthorized countries, and then data exfiltration. I kind of touched on that earlier, where people are sending out files, sending out links, or they're deleting too many files. Somebody doing malicious things to you in way of file sharing. And then if a new device is added, if all of a sudden your email is now set up on a new device, you kind of alluded to that, where that SIM, where they can copy the SIM card and actually, clone your phone, if you will. Those type things are important. And then, of course, if somebody changes the security policy or group changes, you want to be alerted on these things so that before something bad happens, that the potential has happened to make those things possible. You want to weigh in on any of that?
I mean, I think you're just talking to, well, it's another Coveyism, be proactive.
Yes.
Simply be proactive. The cost of upfront costs here, pale in comparison to an incident. And as I mentioned earlier, the pain will flow through the whole organization. It's not only going to affect your IT department or the targeted department, but it really will affect the whole org. So having these things, watched over and systems in place is certainly a good proactive approach.
Sure. All right. And then next, we're going to kind of turn this over to Billy. This is his wheelhouse with some of these things. These are some security measures that you've got to have in place. And a lot of these measures are readily available to be set up. I'll add that, but they're not. You know what I mean? They're there, but nobody turns the dial to make it happen. Of course, the first one is multi-factor authentication.
Yeah, just basic level. I don't know. We've talked a lot about MFA. It is the first thing you're ever told from a security standpoint is turn on MFA. It's the first thing we ever looked at on accounts when we were trying to help. Is MFA enabled? If it's not enabled, that is step one. So definitely the first basic step to proactively protecting your mailbox and other assets.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Then we're going to get a little technical, but we're going to keep it at the business level.
Yep. So SPF, Sender Policy Framework. So a quick note on that. So it came around about circa 2000. It was to authenticate email via the IP servers, or basically what servers that email should have come from. It was a response to what we call the Joe Job attack, where bad actors would just send a bunch of fraud while pretending to be someone else, and then watches the someone else becomes a victim of the garbage that gets thrown back. So early days, protect the email operators from the Joe Job victims. The email operators out there, the Microsofts, the Googles, those who send on your behalf, your marketing platforms, they use SPF to identify themselves and their infrastructure. Today, a lot of SPF records are what we call bloated. They have too many entries. They're old because it's been around since 2000. That does increase the attack surface for an organization. So if you have the availability to get the help, your SPF records should be reviewed at some point.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll give just one quick example that I think a business owner, some people are using some form of software that sends on their behalf. Like we use HubSpot. So HubSpot is sending emails on our behalf. if that's not configured properly or managed properly, that could be exploited. So that's just one example of, it's not just coming from just your Outlook that you're sending email from on a business level. There's a lot of other tools that send email on one's behalf, and if they're not managed right. All right, here's the next one.
Yeah, DKIM, we call it affectionately. It's Domain Keys Identified Mail. So with the SPF in place since 2000, there were still some downfalls. SPF does not survive forwarding, for example. Not that I forwarded an email to Philip, but you have something set up in your mailbox to automatically forward maybe your college email over to your business email, something of that nature. And so it creates a link by letting the domain owner use cryptology. And to keep it simple, basically you have a key that's on the server, a key on your DNS, and then that's tied to your email. So when your email arrives at the receiving server, they can check those through the cryptology and say, in fact, that is from you, it is your email, and it hasn't been tampered with. So it was very instrumental in pushing the email authentication a notch forward.
Yep. And then the next, of course, is some form of email spoofing protection.
Yeah, so that would roll into, what SPF and DKIM, were built to stop. And so that will probably roll us right into DMARC itself.
That's right, exactly. It's a form of watching all of this and using it based off of this right here. So, and this is really, like, I would say, this is the manager, right? I mean, how would you describe DMARC in relation? Because it really is using the other type tools and kind of managing them is how I, think of it. But you could probably clean that up a little more for me.
Oh yeah, I will help. I will try to help. So this is our techno baby, Demartian, the founder of Demartian, a friend of mine now. Tim Dragan is one of the primary authors of this RFC. And an RFC is a referral for comment. And so everyone knows, this is an interesting point for you guys to know. Everything we do on the internet, SPF, DKIM, the way the internet works in any what manner is what we call based on a referred for comment. So computer scientists and engineers come up with an idea, they put it out there, it's bounced around, and then ultimately it's accepted or rejected. DMARC was formed in 2012. It basically is a free interoperability standard that tells the email operators how to send and receive email so that the identity of the email, where it says it comes from, can be reliably checked. And the reliable identity, what we call DMARC compliance email, provides several big benefits. One, DMARC turns on the lights. In other words, you can see all of your email traffic, where it's coming from. It is a strong defense against phishing and spoofing, email fraud in general. Side note for your marketing teams, it improves deliverability. So when email operators see that DMARC aligned message come in, they will put it in the inbox. And then compliance from governments and cybersecurity insurance providers is now pushing DMARC because, again, it solidifies these two technologies, SPF and DKIM, with now the visibility and tying these together from your known from address. We'll dive into that a little more. But then lastly, it is now part of what we call the zero trust infrastructure. This is a buzzword that's rolling around. It says basically trust nothing, not only outside your network, but even within your network. As apps pass things around, they should not be trusted because if one gets compromised, then it can infect the others. This diagram's a little busy, but it does explain DMARC well. If we start from the left, you are the sender. You go to your email server, and then when the recipient email servers receive your messages, they send a report back. It is in a format called .xml. It is basically unreadable by humans. The machines bounce these things back and forth to talk to each other. Our application reveals those XMLs and shows you the state of your domains and the state of your SPF and your DKIM records, and the state of the records for those who send on your behalf. If you have a published DMARC record, then the servers take these other steps. Has DMARC been implemented? And then what is the policy? There's 3 policies. None, where we just collect data. Quarantine, where you say if this message is not aligned, we'll look at that in a moment, go to quarantine. That could be your spam folder, your junk folder, or your hosted quarantine if you use a service. And then ultimately reject is the goal, so that if the message does not meet DMARC alignment and authentication, the message will just drop completely. And this is all handled at your DNS. So I would assume that very few people, maybe one to your IT provider and maybe a key person in your organization has access to DNS. And this is all controlled there. So you can see how tight that this really gets.
Yeah. So here is a little bit more information as to, kind of how it works. And I'll say that ultimately this is there, it's available, it can be set up. No, of course, this is a service that we're using through you guys that monitors it proactively, which is great because we know, but most of our clients and most people have not completely gone through the steps of setting all of this up correctly. And that's why we created this service, because it's just, if you leave a crack in the door, these bad guys are getting through it. I mean, that's common language. That's the simple format. But you want to speak to this anymore?
Yeah. Let me clarify this matrix just a little bit. So if we move from left to right, you got the alignment, DKIM only, SPF only, and then a fail. This is showing that your from address, your address that Billy at demartian.com is my from address, and Philip at Biz. So the from address is known, but it can also be altered even within Outlook. I can put anybody's email address as my from address. The far right address, the SPF address, is the one that the machines know. And so that would be the other one that they look at that would differ from the from address. So just to kind of simplify this, we can call DKIM and SPF the suspenders and DMARC the belt. And you need at least one suspender to work with your belt. And this is just showing an example that as long as your DKIM and or SPF is set up correctly and matches your from address, you will get DMARC compliance and your messages will be considered authenticated and get through nicely. And again, without getting into the weeds too much, out of the box, sometimes these values will be different and they need to be configured correctly so that your email will pass DMARC authentication and make it to the inbox and so forth.
Yeah. And I know you touched on it earlier, but I want to go back to it because we're seeing a lot, especially with Gmail addresses, where if you do not have some of these things correctly configured, it's going to put you in a spam folder or it's going to block your message completely. And so the world is waking up to these things and the importance of them. Even on a lot of the cyber liability forums, they're talking about, DNS management for your email, which is basically this DMARC alignment, having these tools put in place. So we're seeing it, all over the place. And I like these forms on the, which is crazy to sound because nobody likes the forms on the for cyber liability insurance, but to me it's very important because it tells these guys are in front of the line. You talked earlier about how a lot of the data that we get 6 months to a year old. Well, if you're paying out money as a cyber liability insurance company, you get the message real quick as to what's going on, and you want to stop that outlay of capital. So a lot of times they're giving us indicators as to really what's happening in near real time to the marketplace, which, we need to perk our ears up and listen. And that's really one of the reasons, the driving forces behind this webinar, is that I'm seeing that more and more on these cyber liability things. And when I talk to some guys, I've got some clients that are in that cyber liability insurance world, and they're saying, yeah, that's real. That's this email spoofing, this business email compromise is really, it's a forest fire rate right now. It's blazing. So you want to take care of that.
Absolutely. And we all know insurance companies have their first major role when you contact them is not to pay out. And so they're going to look for things that you missed. And DMARC is becoming more and more of a role in this. And it can fall under maybe best email practices as well too. So just a note.
That's right. Yeah. Sometimes they don't claim it. They don't, again, a lot of that stuff, I don't think they spell out well enough for us. You got to almost be in the know to figure it out what they're really asking, but you're right. Yeah. So All right, so we're going to have a time here in a minute to answer some questions, but I want to talk about this. I'm going to talk about it in relation to email, but I also want you to hear it in everything. Incident response is huge, and there's statistics I can't even remember what they are, but how much better industry or business fares does better if they have some form of incident response. And I don't care if it's something on a napkin. I don't care. I mean, of course, we want something much better than that, but have you had the conversation with your team? When something happens, who do you contact? What and what is the when something happens? So we want to figure out what is the event trigger. Is it a spam email? Is it a hurricane in the Gulf? Is it a employee that's being dismissed? We got to figure out what is the incident so that we can figure out when the trigger gets pulled, and then who do you contact? You contact the office manager, the IT company. Who gets contacted, and then what are the steps? Lay out some simple logical steps within what needs to happen, and then how long do we, before we're back to normal, is the disaster recovery piece of that. Okay, this happened. All right, now we need countermeasures to have in place so that we can know that we're going to be back up and working in X number of hours or X number of days or whatever it is, what time frame, and I accept that. As a business owner, we need to know those things and we need to lead in those areas, because the companies that do some very simple things fare so much better over companies who don't do anything. And of course, I'm always here to help on that kind of stuff. But and we also want to remember that Microsoft 365 and Google Suite do not guarantee backup of data as it relates to this. I've seen so many people that they think that because they put it in their OneDrive that that's a backup, and it's really not. I've seen companies share, thousands and even hundreds of thousands of files within the SharePoint portal, and they're thinking that it's being backed up, and it is not being backed up. That is just it's a tool for the file storage and syncing, but it is not guaranteed. You can go read Microsoft's documentation. They do not guarantee backup after 30 days.
Yep, and both highly recommend the third-party backup in the cases, and certainly having your data in a couple of good, secure places never hurts.
That's for sure, for sure. So, all right, we're going to jump into another poll here. This poll's pretty simple about, really what are you most concerned about? Is it, we've got some options here. The employees are not being trained on email threats, not having the right strategy in place. And again, we're looking for the one that bothers you the most, not having the right strategy in place to prevent an attack, encryption and keeping sensitive information secure. Little technical there, or it could be something else, but what is worrying you as a business owner, based off of these 4 questions. I don't know, Billy, what's worrying you, buddy? Lunch or what?
Well, I mean, it's Friday Eve, so I'm worried about how to plan my weekend.
There you go. That's
hope
great.
Everybody's looking toward a good one, I hope.
That's right, for sure. I don't know, as it relates to business for me, and for my clients, I take such a dang, I tell you, I just worry about not only for my company, but for all these companies, how do you stay one step ahead? What is it going to take? And the thing I hate about it is that the bad actors keep changing their tactics, and it causes us to constantly, go on the offensive in a different way. It's not so much even the learning about it, it's going and really trying to keep everybody close behind. I think I'm more of a pioneer by heart. A pioneer is 11 hills ahead, and that's great. But if your team's not right behind you, you're not really, you're not going to be effective in keeping people safe. All right, so had a few more. I'll wait just another minute. That's probably some more difficult questions, but we'll share the results here. kind of split, I guess. Employees on their training, not having the right strategy in place. Probably should have put something on even understanding what the risk is. I think probably would have been a good question there. And then encryption. Any comments on that before we move on?
Yeah, no, I think all of these resonate. I think they're equally important, and I think the poll kind of grabs that and shows that.
For sure. All right, so we'll move on, and we're going to go to Q&A in here just in a second. But for the guys who've jumped on this call with us, we're going to offer an email security risk assessment. This is where we're going to look at those, the SPF, the DKIM, the DMARC. We're also going to send a simulated phishing attack out to your entire organization to see, just how good your team is at spotting a phishing attack. And we'll do an Office 365 security review as well. One of the challenges I think that Microsoft has with Office 365 is that it's a very powerful tool, and you can actually put, Microsoft and security in the same sentence nowadays, which is great because, along the way they've lacked the security portion, but now it's just too doggone complex. I mean, what's your thoughts on that, Billy? I mean, the average business guy, he's not going to be able to navigate through that 365 portal or even the G Suite portal. There's too many options.
Yeah, I mean, if we look back to Microsoft's beginnings, they were only an enterprise play. Only enterprises could afford those giant, giant rooms full of computers and engineers to run it and make things happen. As time's gone forward, things have gotten easier. But if you've ever looked at a TechNet article from Microsoft on how to configure even MFA, there's a lot of steps. And in Microsoft's world, they think that every company from enterprise to the SMB has an IT expert on staff who can own this and help configure it correctly. And that's simply not true. And so you have a lot of other companies are coming to fill in the needs for the SMB. And Philip, you have some in your hip pocket that you can plug in. And so kind of avoid the complexity of Microsoft's and land a third party, in front, within, and so forth to kind of make up some of those more complex enterprise tools that, quite frankly, would be inefficient and would not be a good investment to invest to get them configured, because you also have to watch those configurations.
That's it.
Yeah.
And tune it for no false positives, tuning down the false positives and all that stuff makes it challenging. Also, a governance document, basically looking at the documents you have in place. There's probably as many as 12 or 13 documents every business needs to have, and about 8 of them their staff need to sign for acknowledgement, and then also taking a look at your cyber liability insurance. But this is for anybody that's been on this webinar. I'd like for you to respond, within about the next few weeks. We'll leave that open. And if you have questions, you could always send emails to events, but we'll open it up for Q&A. Christy, do we have any questions out there?
We do. So we had a few come in. The first one is, so one tool won't keep everything protected?
Short answer is no. I don't know, Billy, you take that. I wish there was. I had a client a long time ago, funny story. He was like, why can't I just put basically antivirus on my computer? Why do I have to have anything else? But Billy, you alluded to it because you talked about, just some of the, all the things that have come down as it relates to email. What's your thoughts on one tool?
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't exist. I mean, if you put antivirus on your machine and say, okay, I'm secure, well, you've let the bad guy in the front door. He's sitting at your dinner table and you're just denying him food. So, keeping them out of the front door, that's the role of DeMartian. Never let those emails even get to you. They simply reject. The encryption is important. So, that again, that is a separate service, but you've got to encrypt those important files because you don't want to send that postcard across the internet. And then, archiving and backup. Those are two distinctly different services, but equally important. Some organizations are compelled to archive for certain time periods. That would be, healthcare, financial, medical verticals, for example. So it really does take everything from your DNS all the way to the firewall and the PC itself to help deflect these threats.
For sure. Any other questions, Christy?
Yes. Can you do anything about phishing texts?
Ooh.
What was the last? Phishing what?
Text messages.
Oh, Billy, I don't know. What you can block them after the fact. Is there any? I don't even know of any great tools out there for phishing text. That's a good question.
Yeah. So my provider offers a security suite that supposedly has this relief, but then there was a story out right behind me joining this different provider that said that application was also intrusive from a privacy standpoint. So I think it's the same thing as a malicious email. Look for the ask. Are they asking for something? Do they need a response? Is it unfamiliar? And always, always never be afraid to dial a number and pick up a phone and call someone if you get something and you think it's not real.
Incident response. Yeah, we'll go back to that. And then also, I think that the text is kind of the Wild West out there. And I just got through with a webinar on a security report, and mobile devices being one of the major risk factors, that are actually taking a hit. And I'm sure that there's going to be another service. We started off with, why can't there be one bitter pill to take? Why is there so many? And I'm sure there's going to be a company that comes along and figures out the texting, that spam on texting, or things that are coming in that are malicious on text.
Yeah, and again, your provider should have some sort of relief for you. So I would check with them first, and then look at that independently.
Great. So we had one more question, and we also had a comment from TJ. Great presentation. Thank you, TJ. And then the last comment is, what's the best way to train my employees on phishing?
You got to fish them. You got to test them. There's a lot of services out there. We offer one that I think is really, I like the one that we use specifically because it gives a grade, a numeric value to the particular individual. But I think the short answer is you got to test them, and you got to test them all the time. We do one a month. Usually it's enough to where it kind of keeps it in aware, keeps them aware. But going back to the, kind of grading them, it looks at how many times their account's been breached. It looks at how they scored on their cyber liability. One of the things you guys need to be doing is training all of your employees at least annually on cybersecurity. It looks at their score on that. It looks at, there's like weekly micro trainings that come out. It looks at how many they've taken, and it looks at how many times they've been caught in a phish. And it kind of has a computation behind that, and it gives them a score. And then that way you can know, really who your biggest players are on the team that have more of a propensity to getting caught in a security incident. All right. So we're a couple minutes over, so we'll cut that off. Of course, if you ever have questions, of course, we could make Billy available for sure. And all you have to do is email something to events@askbis.com. We'd be happy to take up anything offline. And Billy, I'd like to just say, of course, thank you to you and all the folks that have joined us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invite, and I enjoy bringing people up to speed on what's out there. So thank you.
Great. You guys have a good afternoon. And again, thanks for coming, and stay tuned. We'll have more things like this in the future. All right.
Bye.
Have a good day. Talk to y'all soon.